The Harlem Renaissance was a flowering of literature and other arts in New York City during the 1920s and 30s, and has been long considered by many to be the high point in African American writing. It probably had its foundations in the works of W.E.B. Du Bois, an influential editor of The Crisis from 1910 to 1934. Du Bois believed that an educated black elite should lead blacks to liberation. He further believed that his people could not achieve social equality by emulating white ideals, that equality could be achieved only by teaching black racial pride with an emphasis on African American cultural heritage. Although the Renaissance was not a school, nor did the writers associated with it share a common purpose, nevertheless, they had a common bond. They dealt with black life from a black perspective. Among the major writers who are usually viewed as part of the Harlem Renaissance are Claude McKay, Countee Cullen, Langston Hughes, Zora Neale Hurston, James Weldon Johnson, and Jean Toomer. There was a sense of honoring the past, but also of building a future. In the words of James Weldon Johnson, author of the Negro National Anthem, Lift Every Voice and Sing, listen to these words. O black and unknown bards of long ago, how came your lips to touch the sacred fire? How in your darkness did you come to know the power and beauty of the minstrel's lyre? Who from midst of his bonds lifted his eyes? Who first from out the still watch, lone and long, feeling the ancient faith of prophets rise within his dark-kept soul, burst into song? Heart of what slave poured forth the melody, steal away to Jesus on its strain? His spirit must have nightly floated free, though still about his hands he felt his chains. Who heard great Jordan roll, whose starward eye saw chariot swing low? And who was he that breathed that comforting melodic sigh? Nobody knows the trouble I see. What merely living clod, what captive thing could up towards God through all its darkness grope and find within its deadened heart to sing these songs of sorrow, love, and faith and hope? How did it catch that subtle undertone, that note in music heard not with ears? How sound the elusive reed so seldom blown, which stirs the soul and melts the heart to tears? Not that great German master in his dream of harmonies that thundered amongst the stars at the creation ever heard a theme nobler than "Go down, Moses." Mark its bar. How like a mighty trumpet call they stir the blood. Such are the notes that men have sung, going to valorous deeds. Such tones there were that helped make history when time was young. There is a wide, wide wonder in it all, that from degraded rest and servile toil, the fiery spirit of the seer should call these simple children of the sun and soil. O black slave singers, gone, forgot, unfamed. You alone, of all the long line of those who have sung, untaught, unknown, unnamed, have stretched out upward, seeking the divine. James Weldon Johnson recognized the transformation of the people. And though he extols the accomplishments of the slaves who wrote what is often in the spirituals, they're anonymously in our hymn book and in so many hymn books in every church in this country, he also grieves that they had not written it down. He wrote, "A people may become great by many means, but there is only one measure by which its greatness is recognized and acknowledged. The final measure of greatness of all peoples is the amount and standard of the literature and the art they have produced. The world does not know that a people is great until that people produces great literature and art." It is with this in mind that he and others set out to write, very intentionally creating an African-American literary heritage. Zora Neale Hurston contributed much to this by writing down African-American folklore, and also wrote fiction from her perspective. The struggle that many of the writers in that age had was the struggle with being African and being American, but not really belonging to either. W. E. Du Bois said, "It is a peculiar sensation, this double consciousness, this sense of always looking at oneself through the eyes of others, of measuring one's soul by the tape of a world that looks on in amused contempt and pity. One ever feels his two-ness, an American, a Negro, two souls, two thoughts, two unreconciled strivings, two warring ideals in one dark body, whose dogged strength alone keeps it from being torn asunder." Listen to this poem by County Cullen. Heritage. What is Africa to me? Copper sun or scarlet sea, jungle star or jungle track, strong bronze men or regally black, women from whose loins I sprang when birds of Eden sang. One of 3 centuries removed from the scenes that his father loved, spicy grove and cinnamon tree. What is Africa to me? And this one, entitled Incident. Once riding in old Baltimore, heart-filled, head-filled with glee, I saw a Baltimorean keep looking straight at me. Now I was 8 and very small, and he was no whit bigger, so I smiled. But he poked out his tongue and called me nigger. I saw the whole of Baltimore from May until December. Of all the things that happened there. That's all I remember. Langston Hughes, perhaps the most celebrated of Harlem Renaissance, spoke out to be recognized as a full member of American society. I too sing America. I am the darker brother. They send me to eat in the kitchen when company comes, but I laugh and eat well and grow strong. Tomorrow, I will sit at the table when company comes, and no one will dare to say to me, eat in the kitchen then. Besides, they will see how beautiful I am and be ashamed. I, too, am America. As Langston became more popular, he indeed became a fashionable dinner guest of wealthy white patrons. He was invited to the table, yet it was a strange experience. Dinner guest, me. I know I am the Negro problem, being wined and dined, answering the usual questions that come to the white mind, which seeks to demurely probe in a polite way the why and wherewithal of darkness, USA. Wondering how things got this way. In current democratic night, murmuring gently over Frachis du Bois, I'm so ashamed of being white. The lobster is delicious, the wine divine, and center of attention at the damask table mine. To be a problem on Park Avenue at 8 is not so bad. Solutions to the problem, of course, wait. The waiting to be a full participant is frustrating then, and it is still frustrating now. And I think of what that means for us as a Unitarian Universalist congregation. People who were involved in the founding of the NAACP, people who were involved in marching with Dr. King and having martyrs come out of that struggle, people who in this town integrated the swimming pools. But yet our whiteness, despite voting correctly all these years, is overwhelming. To be a truly welcoming congregation, we cannot just merely invite African Americans to be guests at our table. And it's a shame that 70 years later, this poem of Langston Hughes is still true in our congregations and in America. What happens to a dream deferred? Does it dry up like a raisin in the sun or fester like a sore and then run? Does it stink like rotten meat or crust and sugar over like a syrupy sweet? Maybe it just sags. like a heavy load? Or does it explode? It explodes when problems are ignored or explained away. Gene Toomer thought it was important to not let white people forget the presence of black folks. How like a specter you haunt the pale devils, always at their elbows, always peering through the window, giving them no rest, no peace. How they burn up their energies to keep you out. How apologetic and uneasy they are. Yet even the best of them, when you force an entrance, facetiously, incorrigibly smiling, disturbing, composed, shock them out of their complacency. Make them uncomfortable. Make them unhappy. Give them no peace, no rest. How can they bear your presence, black face, great unspeakable ghost of Western civilization? This attitude reminds me of the chant from the gay liberation movement, "We're here, we're queer, get used to it." It is a political act to stand up and not be ignored. The Harlem Renaissance was the equivalent of black people coming out of the closet. And indeed, as the sexuality of some of the Harlem writers is questioned, the black community is facing at these times its own homophobia as they remember. These poets faced the world on their own terms, not as stereotypes, but as full-fledged human beings. Alain Locke called this the emergence of the new Negro. Remember that this is the 1920s, and the word Negro is an improvement over what African Americans were usually called. Alain Locke writes this: "For generations in the mind of America, the Negro has been more of a formula than a human being, something to be argued about, condemned, or defended, to be kept down in his place or helped up, to be worried with or worried over, harassed or patronized, a social bogey, a social burden. His shadow has been more real to him than his personality." The Harlem Renaissance was people defying stereotypes by simply being themselves and defining themselves. They were people defining themselves and their dreams and doing their utmost to fulfill them. Langston Hughes wrote, "Hold fast to dreams, for if dreams die, life is a broken-winged bird that cannot fly. Hold fast to dreams, for when dreams go, life is as barren as a frozen field with snow." But this dreaming was not ethereal. The dreams were more real than the artificial barriers that denied them a place in society. Zora Neale Hurston writes, "I shall try to lay my dreaming aside, try hard. Oh, if you knew my dreams, my vaulting ambition, how I constantly live in 7-league boots, taking many strides against the world, but conscious all the time of being a mouse on a treadmill." Dreams and reality are intertwined. Claude McKay said, "Poets may dream, but dreams are ferment of the stuff of reality. Hurston realized that freedom begins in the mind. She writes of the 20s in Harlem, "No man may make another free. Freedom was something internal. The outside signs were just signs and symbols of the man inside. All you could do was give the opportunity for freedom, and the man himself will make his own emancipation." The dreams of the Harlem Renaissance move towards our present reality, but it's not a smooth and steady upward trend. The 20s and 30s may have been a flowering of black literature, the age of jazz and Duke Ellington. And I want to thank Bill Morrison for bringing a CD of Ellington that we listened to before the service and then after the postlude during coffee hour. But this time was also the time of movie stereotypes, of Stepin Fetchit, Al Jolson in blackface, Butterfly McQueen, who didn't know nothing about birthing no babies. But there was money to be made in portraying the white stereotypes of blacks. And these people did what they could to feed their family. But this dichotomy still exists today. Maya Angelou, Wynton Marsalis, Bobby McFerrin are contrasted by gangster rap artists who are the Stepin Fetchits of our age, making money pandering to the negative stereotypes that white record producers and suburban teens want to get their vicarious thrills from. And how do we as UUs deal with the problem of race in our age? Are we, like Langston Hughes' dinner host, patronizingly ashamed of being too white as a denomination? Or are we prepared to deal with people on their terms as they define themselves? And in this country that has been so conscious of race from its beginnings, these definitions are breaking down. The USA in 1920 was essentially a black and white world. In 2004, we are 71% white, 12% black, 13% Hispanic, and 4% Asian. The 2000 census had a new category, mixed race. Tiger Woods is black, white, Asian, and Native American. Eddie Van Halen is white and Indonesian. Mariah Carey is black, Hispanic, and white. There is a blurring of the lines. Perhaps this confusion will cause us to give up the categories altogether. And maybe we can accept each other as Americans no matter what people look like. We need to do away with the assimilation model that accepts only those who fit into a preordained mold, including those preordained molds of racial categories. UUs, we consider ourselves to be the intelligentsia. Are we prepared? That has its own problems about inclusiveness. Because I've heard people say, well, how will we get blacks and Hispanics when there's so few that would ever have the education to come here. And I think we need to address that intelligentsia issue because we're not doing too good at attracting white people because of our arrogant attitude. But we should at least be prepared to meet the black intelligentsia on their own terms, and this week we have an opportunity. Just in the paper this morning, I saw that Rita Dove, a poet whose list of accolades runs the length of several sonnets, chief among these is the Pulitzer Prize, which she won in 1987, and a 2-year appointment as the nation's poet laureate. Rita Dove will be appearing Thursday from noon to 1:30 at the Central Library's auditorium as part of a program called On the Same Poem. People will be discussing her poem, Daystar. And here's that poem. She wanted a little room for thinking, but she saw diapers steaming on the line. A doll slumped behind the door, so she lugged a chair behind the garage to sit out the children's naps. Sometimes there were things to watch. The pinched armor of a vanished cricket, a floating maple leaf. Other days she stared until she was assured. When she closed her eyes, she'd see only her own vivid blood. She had an hour, at best, before Liza appeared, pouting from the top of the stairs. And just what was Mother doing out back with the field mice? Why? Building a palace later? Why? Why? Building a palace. Later that night, when Thomas rolled over and lurched into her, she would open her eyes and think of that place that was hers for an hour where she was nothing, pure nothing, in the middle of the day. That sounds like Zen to me. Rita Dove will be here in town. If you can't catch her on your lunch hour at the library, she will be speaking at the Salem College Center for Women's Writers at 7 p.m. Thursday night. Both programs are free. And this is just one thing we can do as we just let ourselves be known as the place that follows up our thoughts and our deeds about racial equality with actions that truly build a multicultural community, both in this congregation and in the world at large. Amen.